Hello. Now, I think most people know what breathing is, but is there more to it than just inhaling and exhaling? Well, today we're going to find out, and I'm really pleased to welcome Jane Tarrant today.
Thanks for having me.
So, Jane, why is it so important that we breathe properly?
So, how we breathe really impacts the rest of our life. And it starts off as a child that as we breathe through our mouth or our nose, our tongue position changes. And we really need to be nose breathing with our tongue in the correct position to help form our face correctly, forward, sideways, and to create a nice wide smile with gaps, allowing for our adult teeth to grow through and also to improve the airway. But even as we get older, we still need to be able to breathe properly to benefit from optimal breathing habits. And we'll talk about that more in a minute.
Fantastic. Now, why do our breathing habits degrade?
So, for a lot of people, it's down to just how we live. So, for example, if you imagine a teenager who scoots their bum to the front of a chair and curves their spine, or somebody who's crouched down looking at their laptop without it being the right height, we find that we actually compress over our diaphragm. So, we're actually restricting the diaphragm, which sits just underneath the ribs across the top of our belly. And when we do this, it means we're not breathing correctly with the right muscles. We start to use backup muscles, either in the upper chest or the lower belly. And this becomes normal eventually because we're not actually able to access it. Or for the other reason is we might find that if we become mouth breathers or snorers as children due to pollen or cat hair or hot houses or whatever makes us feel a bit more congested. For often it can be like milk allergies or mold, for example, for children as well. You might find their tongue drops out of position and their facial space is impacted. And we struggle sometimes to then get the tongue back into the roof of the mouth because it forms much narrower with crooked teeth.
Ah. Now, what kind of symptoms show up for someone who isn't breathing optimally?
So, common ones are things like anxiety and panic attacks. So, somebody, for example, who breathes a little bit too much all the time, they start to deteriorate something called CO2 tolerance or carbon dioxide tolerance. And this is what triggers us to need to breathe more. But we want it to be at a more optimal level. And over time, maybe we've been a bit stressed, we've gone through grief, we've got poor habits, we're compromising our diaphragm. We've got to the point where we started to reduce that. And that's what starts to trigger us even more because we're now stuck in an upper chest or a mouth breathing pattern where we're breathing that little bit too much all the time. Other things might be snoring, mouth breathing. We might find that somebody is really struggling with low energy, poor sleep, poor stress management, maybe reaching a lot more for sugar, alcohol, or any other way to get through the day. So it can show up in multiple different ways. And I think a lot of people have no idea how breathing impacts us in that way, but we really need to focus on optimizing all of these areas.
That's very interesting. Now, if someone was to change their breathing habits, how long does it start to or take to start seeing or feeling the benefits?
So it depends on the situation, but most people that come to either my masterclasses or corporate sessions, or if they're just coming to hear a bit, or I meet them on the street and tell them about it, generally just by changing your tongue position, you can notice a huge amount in about a week. So I've had a lot of people notice they're feeling a lot calmer because they're nose breathing, so they're actually slowing down the air. And they're actually then reducing that stress in their nervous system. And they're also finding they're recalibrating their breathing. So they are actually able to cope with a little less air. For some people, though, it can take 2 to 3 weeks to start feeling like they're actually noticing a big difference. Maybe they're starting to sleep better or they feel less congested. And then usually I work with someone over about 8 weeks because that's how long it takes to start really building habits in. And most of the benefits we want to see start within those 8 weeks. Some things, though, if you're looking for high performance or snoring where you need to do a lot more toning, it can take a little bit longer to get to the levels you want to. But we always see improvement within those 8 weeks.
Fantastic. Now, that's not really a huge amount of time when you consider we take, in the circa 22,000 breaths a day and we breathe all our lives. So it's a small price to pay to get your breathing right. So how can
Exactly.
breathing enhance one's overall health and wellness?
So, by breathing more optimally, we can improve what I mentioned earlier, the CO2 tolerance. And this means that we're able to widen our blood vessels that little bit more. So, we can get more what I like to call red buses full of oxygen that have collected oxygen from our lungs and delivering them to our brains or to our muscles or wherever they need to go. But if you imagine somebody who is a slight overbreather, so somebody who's breathing fast, shallow, loudly, through their mouth, into their upper chest. In this scenario, by 20 something thousand times a day, you are reducing the width of that road for those buses. So although you've got lots of oxygen in your blood, you're not actually able to deliver it to the location it needs to go in the same quantities that we'd like. And in the same way, it's the carbon dioxide that we're keeping in that little tiny bit longer that helps open the doors and get that oxygen off. So what we see from that is better focus, better performance, better recovery. And in addition to that, we like to see things like your nose, which can then filter viruses, particles, allergens, all sorts of stuff in the air that allows us to feel that we're not going to get as sick, but also it moistens and warms the air and pressurizes it. So it's much more efficient, it takes less energy, and we feel better overall.
Incredible what just breathing can do for us, isn't it? Now, is there a certain amount of time or and during the day that people should really try and focus specifically on breathing?
So there's a lot of people that will say, oh, you should do 10 minutes of breath work every morning and every night, or this sort of thing. I don't say that. My concept here is that we should be checking in with ourselves regularly throughout the day and just tweaking, just being aware, making sure it's not running away with us. But we don't actually need to be actioning huge amounts of time for breath work or meditation or mindfulness if that's not accessible to us. It doesn't mean there's not benefits to those things. They're wonderful in their own right. But for many people, that's just not easy. So what we try to do is, for example, I ask people to do a 2-minute bedtime routine. That's it, 2 minutes. That's the most I'll ever ask someone to do in a row. And otherwise, it's just checking in. And we do different ways to train to actually improve that awareness. And even to the point where you start to see visual triggers that then change how you breathe in that scenario, like a staircase.
So obviously, it's best to learn how to breathe as young as possible. How can someone teach their child about healthy breathing habits?
So repetition is super important, and showing them how to breathe through the nose, learning the correct tongue position, for example, in the roof of the mouth to help the nose feel bigger is super important. And also trying to sort of find whatever resources you can. Sometimes children are much better at taking it from something or someone else rather than yourself. And this is where I saw a huge gap in the industry, because I couldn't find anything to educate my own daughter, let alone everybody else's. So I wrote a book called Rose Loses Her Nose, which is a storybook that then ends in education and then has some sort of things you can do at the back to train your tongue, your diaphragm, and your ribs. And this has absolutely changed everything for me. And I was able to even teach my 7-year-old non-god godson how it was so important. And he was really fascinated. And just having that resource just captures their imagination. He was talking about it the next day to his mum already.
Oh, how fantastic. Now, how can someone actually work out what breathing habits they have?
So this is one of the hardest points. And no matter how many breathwork things you listen to or whatever you read, this is this crucial element. And this is actually why I provide this for free. So every single month, I actually provide a masterclass called How to Recognize Your Current Breathing Habits. And we do it via Zoom. It's live, and everybody can come from all over the world at different times. And we put our hands onto our body in specific places, and we start to understand the subtleties of what's moving, when, how much, and why. And we get to understand a little bit more about why we're breathing in a particular way and how it might be impacting us. And then we learn a little bit more about what we should be doing. So actually, many people who come to that never even need to come back to me. They just get the information they need and they go off and educate others.
And I can highly recommend that training, because even though I thought I breathed quite well, I did your training and realized I was doing it completely wrong. So I now, even while we've been talking, is like, is my tongue in the right place? Yes, my end spot's there. So it's stuck in my head. So it works. I can definitely attest to that. So how can someone find out more? Where can they go?
So I would suggest, if you want to find out a little bit more, but you don't necessarily want to come to a masterclass, then I did a TEDx last year, TEDx talk, which is on YouTube, and that is how to optimize your breathing habits. And this will show you a little bit more about the science behind it, give you an example of somebody who's actually been through it and how life-changing it can really be. But it also teaches you about what I call the 3 spots of breathing, which is the N spot, the D spot, and the R spots. And this will give you the basic understanding of what you could go away and try without even having to go to something live or having to pay for anything else.
Brilliant. We always like a freebie, don't we?
Yes.
So how can someone get support if they need it?
So as I mentioned, you've got those masterclass and the TEDx, but if you feel that you need more, maybe somebody needs hand holding through the process, maybe someone's really anxious about how it feels to be changing something, or a bit of accountability, because not all of us can manage to get these things done on our own, even if we want to. My strength is to kind of help people through that, to really kind of find how can it work for you rather than just giving it a go and giving up too early. So I usually work with either corporate teams or one-to-one, or I have an online course as well, which is available. So it's a video learning course, snippy videos suitable for neurodivergent brains to kind of keep going through it, but also weekly support calls. So I'm always there to handhold for as long as needed through the process, and even to redo it in a year so if they want to.
Well, that is fantastic. That's a really great, short, snappy insight into why breathing is so important. And I would really recommend you do sign up for Jane's masterclass. It's very, very interesting and has certainly made some really positive changes to me. And you get to learn about red buses and all these other little fun things that are a really simple and easy way to understand really how breathing can affect you, your health and wellness. So thank you so much for joining us, Jane. We wish you really well in everything that you're doing, and keep spreading the education.
Thank you so much. And all the information is on linkbreathing.co.uk.